There is a moment in every person's life when everything feels stuck. Not broken, not falling apart, just stuck. You wake up, you move through your routines, you check the boxes, and yet something deep inside you knows that you are not operating at your full capacity. You sense it in the quiet moments, in the hesitation before action, in the gap between what you know you could be and what you actually are. And most people, when they feel this, assume the solution is complicated. They think they need a new plan, a new opportunity, a new environment, or even a completely new identity. But the truth is far more precise, far more surgical than that, because there is one change, just one, that has the power to reorganize your entire life from the inside out. And that change is this: taking full, unfiltered responsibility for your actions, your time, and your attention. This is not a philosophical idea. This is a biological and psychological shift that directly alters how your brain operates. When you decide that you are responsible, not partially, not conditionally, but completely, you activate a very different set of neural pathways. You move out of a reactive mode, where your environment dictates your behavior, into an active mode where your behavior begins to shape your environment. Most people live in a state of partial responsibility. They say things like, "I'll start when I feel ready," or "I'll do it when I have more time," or "I can't because of this situation." What they don't realize is that every time they say something like that, they are training their brain to associate action with permission. And permission is dangerous because it places control outside of you. When you make the shift to full responsibility, something very specific happens. You remove the need for permission entirely. You stop negotiating with your emotions. You stop waiting for the perfect conditions. You begin to act based on decisions, not feelings. And this is where transformation begins, because your brain is constantly tracking your behavior. It is watching what you do, not what you say you will do. Every time you follow through on something you committed to, even if it's small, you reinforce a neural identity of reliability. Over time, this builds what can be described as internal trust. And internal trust is one of the most powerful drivers of long-term success. But most people have the opposite pattern. They set goals, they delay, they rationalize, they avoid, and then they repeat. And each time they do that, they weaken their own sense of self-trust. They begin to subconsciously believe that they cannot rely on themselves. That belief then shapes future behavior, creating a loop that feels impossible to break. The one change interrupts that loop. When you decide that you are responsible for everything within your control, including your reactions, your habits, and your effort, you remove the escape routes your brain is used to taking. You create a kind of internal pressure that forces adaptation. This pressure is not negative. In fact, it is necessary. Your nervous system is designed to adapt to stress, but only when that stress is paired with action. If you feel pressure and do nothing, it turns into anxiety. But if you feel pressure and take action, it becomes growth. The difference is not the stress itself, but what you do with it. And this is where most people get it wrong. They try to eliminate discomfort before they act. They wait until they feel confident, motivated, or inspired. But those states are not prerequisites for action. They are byproducts of it. Confidence is built through evidence. Motivation is built through momentum. And momentum only comes from movement. So the one change requires you to reverse the order. Instead of waiting to feel ready, you act first. And when you act, even in a small way, your brain registers progress. That progress releases dopamine, a neurotransmitter that reinforces the behavior and increases your likelihood of repeating it. This is not about hype or temporary excitement. This is about rewiring the reward system in your brain so that effort itself becomes satisfying. When effort becomes rewarding, everything changes. You stop relying on external validation. You stop needing constant results to stay engaged. You begin to enjoy the process of building, improving, and showing up. And when that happens, consistency becomes natural rather than forced. Consistency is what separates transformation from intention. Anyone can feel inspired for a day. Anyone can start something. But very few people can continue when the novelty wears off, when progress slows, when results are not immediately visible. And that is exactly where responsibility becomes critical. Because when you are fully responsible, you don't quit based on how you feel. You adjust, you refine, you continue. There is also a deeper layer to this change, one that affects how you perceive challenges. When you are not fully responsible, obstacles feel like barriers. They feel like things that are happening to you. But when you are responsible, obstacles become information. They become feedback. Instead of asking, "Why is this happening to me?" you start asking, "What can I do differently?" That shift in questioning is powerful because it redirects your focus from blame to solution. Your brain is highly responsive to the questions you ask. If you ask disempowering questions, you will get disempowering answers. But if you ask solution-focused questions, your brain will begin to search for actionable responses. Over time, this builds a problem-solving mindset. And a problem-solving mindset is one of the most valuable traits you can develop because it allows you to navigate uncertainty without becoming overwhelmed. Another critical aspect of this change is how it affects your relationship with time. Most people treat time as something they have or don't have. They say, "I don't have time," as if time is a resource that can be taken away from them. But in reality, time is constant. What changes is how you allocate your attention within that time. Attention is your most valuable resource. Where your attention goes, your energy follows. And where your energy goes, your results are created. When you take full responsibility, you become far more intentional about where you place your attention. You reduce distractions. You become aware of behaviors that drain your focus. You begin to prioritize actions that move you forward, even if they are uncomfortable. This does not mean you become perfect. It means you become aware. And awareness is the first step to change. There will still be days when you feel tired, distracted, or unmotivated. That does not disappear. What changes is your response to those states. Instead of letting them dictate your behavior, you acknowledge them and act anyway. This is where discipline is often misunderstood. Discipline is not about forcing yourself in a harsh or unsustainable way. It is about aligning your actions with your decisions, regardless of your emotional state. It is about reducing the gap between what you intend to do and what you actually do. And that gap is where most people lose their potential. Every time you close that gap, even slightly, you strengthen your identity as someone who follows through. And identity is the foundation of long-term change. You don't rise to the level of your goals. You fall to the level of your systems and your identity. If your identity is someone who acts only when motivated, your progress will always be inconsistent. But if your identity becomes someone who acts because they decided to, your progress becomes stable. This is why the one change is so powerful. It doesn't just affect what you do, it affects who you become. Over time, small actions compound, small decisions accumulate, and what once felt difficult becomes automatic. What once required effort becomes part of your baseline behavior. And then something interesting happens. The things that used to intimidate you begin to feel manageable. The habits that once felt impossible become routine. The version of yourself that once felt distant becomes your reality, not because of a dramatic event, not because of luck, but because of a consistent shift in how you approach your life. There is no shortcut around this. There is no substitute for taking responsibility. You can have the best strategies, the best information, the best opportunities, but if you do not take ownership of your actions, none of it will matter. On the other hand, if you take full responsibility, even imperfectly, you can create progress in almost any situation. And that is what makes this change transformative. It is not dependent on external factors. It does not require special conditions. It is available to you at any moment. Right now, you can decide to act differently. You can decide that your time matters. You can decide that your actions matter. You can decide that your future is shaped by what you do, not what you feel. And when you make that decision and you reinforce it through action again and again, you begin to shift the trajectory of your life. Not all at once, not in a single moment, but steadily, predictably, and powerfully. Because transformation is not an event, it is a process. And that process begins with one change.